Hello, everyone. Welcome to the YA, the longest title I think I've written so far, YA Contemporary Debut Panel Summer Edition, which is not actually, as I was like doing graphics, and I've kind of made so many graphics recently that I've lost track of like what they should be called anymore. It's actually more like YA debut and less YA contemporary debut. So that was my bad. Anyway, I'm really excited for this panel. I think that these books have been so fun to read like in approaching summer. It feels like summer already to me, but like, getting ready for the peak summer season. So if you didn't know who I am, my name's Lily. I am the moderator for the panel, and I'm kind of like the person behind Utopia State of Mind. So I will have now the authors introduce themselves, and then we'll go on to the questions that I have. And then if you all have any questions as well, please leave them in the chat, and I will try to remember to get to them. So, May, do you want to start the author intros?
Sure. Hi, my name is May Cuyudo. I'm a Chinese Filipino writer from the Philippines. Sorry, my copy of my book, this is my mom's. That's why she put her initials there for some reason. So no one would else would touch it, I guess. But this is my debut novel, Chloe and the Kaishao Boys. It's basically about Chloe, a Chinese Filipino girl in Manila whose dad and aunt set her up on Kaishaos, which are arranged dates to convince her to stay home for college instead of going abroad. It's a very fluffy, light rom-com read if you're looking for one.
Hi, I'm Justine Pachella Winans, and I'm the author of Bianca Torre is Afraid of Everything. It's a comedic murder mystery that follows a non-binary teen birder that accidentally witnesses their neighbor's murder and involves their anime-loving best friend and the cute girl from their birding group to help them figure out what really happened.
Hi, I'm Deb Lee. I'm the author and illustrator of In Limbo, which is a graphic memoir. Came out a couple months ago. I guess about me, I'm based in New York. I do mostly illustration work, and because I'm on this panel, I am. This is my first book, but In Limbo is a memoir about being Korean American and also like severely depressed. This is a very dark book, so please approach it with care. I guess like a little fun fact about it is that it got so dark when I was pitching it that my publisher almost didn't take it because it was just like so messed up. So yeah, but yeah, that's enough about me. Let's pass it to Crystal.
Hi everyone, I'm Crystal Marquis. I'm based out of Connecticut, and my debut novel is The Davenports. Like May, I have a personal copy that has like writing, it's a little beat up and everything. But The Davenports is about four young women growing up in Chicago in 1910. They're trying to find love, but a few of them are finding careers and they're kind of dealing with that struggle of doing what their parents want for them and deciding how they want to live their lives.
Hello, I'm Jenna Miller. My first book, Out of Character, if I can get it in the screen right, just came out in February. And it's about Cass, a high school senior who has an online role-playing addiction. And she's trying to juggle that in secrecy while also, going through senior year, first girlfriend, parental drama, her amazing cat, who's really the main character, Mr. Tuttles. So there's just so much going on. And then she finally meets her online best friend in person for the first time and realizes there's a little more than friendship feelings going on. So, not to complicate it further, but that's where she ends up. And I'm based in Minneapolis.
Okay, I want to start off with a pretty basic question, kind of revolving around the debut aspect of our panel. So, the first thing I wanted to know from everyone is kind of how the debut process is treating you all since the debuts are, or since the debuts, since the books are out in the world, and how has it been post pub? What's some useful advice you've gotten or wish you had gotten? May, do you want to start?
Sure. So my book came out in March, and then honestly, I'm not sure if it's sinking in. I don't know. It's like I would. I feel like everyone could relate that like we've been working on this book, this manuscript for like years, and then the release date feels like something you've been working towards but doesn't feel real. So like when it comes, you're like, oh, that's it. Or it feels like so big, but also like not as big as you anticipated. I don't know. That's my take. And then I guess because so many things happen, I just wish that like right now I kind of just like take note of things like when I have like interact with readers and stuff, or like someone sends me a message, I kind of like take that down so that I can look back and be like, oh, this happened. Because sometimes I just get lost with everything that's going on, honestly.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that, so much of publishing is like already planning for things that are like years in the future. So sometimes it's really hard to like actually focus on the present and like what's currently happening and like really, really like feeling joy for all of like the little things that come in. So I think kind of like my advice is, and I love May's idea of like, keeping track of like good messages that come in and saving those somewhere, or even just like celebrating the little things with like dessert or treating yourself or however you like to do it. Just because, at any stage in publishing, there's going to be like rejection at times or like bad news or things that you kind of wanted and maybe like didn't really get. But then, for all of that, there will be a lot of really exciting thing and like readers reaching out, and especially, writing like queer fiction, getting to hear from like queer teens that saw themselves in the book. It's like makes it all worth it. And I think really just trying to celebrate those little moments to sort of keep yourself motivated with all of like the other struggles involved in publishing really goes a long way, and is something that I wish I sort of focused on earlier in the debut process.
Yeah, I feel like May and Justine have captured it so perfectly. So thank you. I don't know. I've been working on In Limbo since 2018. So I've been like basically drawing it for like the last like 4 or 5 years, basically. It's definitely surreal. For me, it kind of lived as like a PDF on my iPad, and now it's like, it's like, I can like actually like hold it, and it's thick, right? But yeah, I guess my advice, which I constantly don't follow, is to like don't pay attention to like the Goodreads. Like it's all like people are weird on the internet. They'll just say like the weirdest stuff. Like I've been told that like people don't like my book because it's black and white. Well, like I don't know what to tell you. Like I'm sorry. Like so yeah, just keep the keep the positive comments close to your heart. Especially since mine is a memoir, I've been like getting DMs from my friends from high school, or like people I didn't really know from high school, and say like, wow, like I had no idea that this is what you're going through. Like I literally just like, that's kind of nuts. um and some messages from other people from my high school that say, like this really described like my exact experience as well. And those comments, are clearly the ones that stand more weight. So having like different weight attributed to each comment is, I think, really crucial to not drown in your pub year. But yeah.
For me, my pub year has been really exciting. I definitely experienced that wave of here are all the things you have to do and always being super busy, and then reminding myself to slow down and enjoy things. And I think one of the things that I really appreciated was the support I got from family and from friends and like my fellow debuts. I think everyone that I've met in this debut year, especially on panels like this, have been really supportive, and it's been really great to speak to people who have walked the same path as you and can relate. And I found a lot of really good advice from other debuts. Um, Another one, Lila Ryson, she always encouraged me to celebrate all the little things. And when I met her in person, she brought me macaroons, which is like my favorite snack to celebrate. And it's really holding on to those little wins and trying to live in the moment, and then sharing and saving those positive, tidbits and things that people reach out to you and say, hey, this really meant a lot to me about your book. I really saw myself in this character. I think that really brings it home and makes it really special.
Yeah, I just have to echo everything that was just said. I think, yeah, celebrating the little wins and having those little treats and things to just relax. And I didn't take my own advice on that. I was not good at relaxing. I feel like we're all taking a collective breath at this point. Like, hey, we've been through this for, however many months now it's been for each of us. And it's been wild, whether, you've been on mostly virtual or in person or, whatever you've done to promote it. Like, it's a lot of work. And I applaud all of you for whatever you've done or, what routes you've taken to promote your books. I also have to say I was in a bookstore yesterday and all your books were there and it just made me so happy to see, like, we're all just showing up in bookstores now, and I'm sure that's been the dream for all of us since, however long. So I think that's really exciting, just going into stores and knowing that like people can grab your book and read it. Um, yeah, and I think as far as advice and other things from other authors, it's just really like eyes on your own paper a lot of the time too. Like, everyone's journey is so different, and I think it's easy to get caught up in like, well, I got this but didn't get that, and it can just feel like a competition in your head, but you're really only competing with yourself. Because all of your writing friends are cheering you on. Like, they don't see what you see and you don't see what they see. And I think it's easy to like start judging yourself. And to Deb's point, like, Goodreads is a monster. And I was in a panel in Colorado recently, and we did this game where we like held up signs if we were doing this or not doing this. I think I was the only one who held up the sign like, "Are you checking your Goodreads?" And I was like, "Oh, you guys don't do that? Okay." So it's just interesting to see how it works for everyone, and it's just been fun to meet other authors and celebrate together.
Yeah, I find asking this question so interesting to me because I think that, I've been doing these debut panels for a while and a lot. And I think that what's interesting to me as well, like a consensus or piece of sort of thing people have been saying as well, is like post or publication date release week. After release week, it feels weird how like it's almost like a marathon which ends, but it doesn't really end, right? Because the lifespan of the book is so long, right? The birth, the release of the book is just the beginning basically of like this evergreen content, like this amazing journey that you see. And it's first the first moment, especially in YA, I think that your book starts reaching actual teens. Beforehand, it's kind of just, reviewers or trade things and like library people. And so it's like a weird cliff, I guess. Like it's a weird ending point, which feels like an end, but it's actually the beginning. I don't know. It's very strange. Um, but yeah, that's one of the things I keep hearing, like when I ask this question on panels. I want to talk a little bit about like common themes and stuff that I had, or things I was thinking about while I was reading all of these books for the panels, for this specific panel. And so one of the things that I was thinking about were family expectations. And I think that family expectations obviously are kind of very important to everyone, but I thought that there's this idea with our family about like who they want us to be and how we should be. And I thought that those were prevalent themes in Limbo and the Davenports. So I was wondering if both of you could talk about what it was like for you to evolve those themes in your book, and like your motivations for wanting to write and explore those themes, and how was it specifically to write those side characters or those, well, in the Davenports, like they're more than just side characters. They're because they're different perspectives as well. But like how it was to write those characters. Deb, do you want to start?
Oh, I was going to say that Crystal should go first because I went first in the previous question.
Sure, I'll go first. Yeah, so for me, the Davenports, it's about this family and about this great accomplishment that Mr. Davenport made. I mean, he had escaped enslavement and built this empire for his family, and now his children are enjoying this life of privilege and wealth that kind of sets them apart. So they're the only ones who have grown up like this, and they're the only ones that they can relate to. But like any other siblings, they have their squabbles, they don't get along, and they're looking for something outside of what their parents want for them. And I think that it's really relatable. I mean, we all have either parents or parent-like figures who have these expectations on us. And as we grow up and learn more about ourselves and the world around us, we can get influenced and pulled in different directions and have different passions that we are really drawn to. And the siblings each have their own passion, and I think that it makes them stronger when they realize that even though they grew up in the same household and they may have shared a lot of similar experiences, that they are different, but they can also use their differences to uplift each other and bring each other along. And I think the two side characters in Amy Rose and Ruby, because they grew up alongside the Davenports, they kind of share in that siblinghood and that growth that they do collectively. And I think it's really interesting to see, even though these four young women grow up in, this bubble similar to each other, that they can have such different passions. And I think their brother John really helps support them in that way too.
Yeah, I mean, if there isn't anything else that Crystal you wanted
Yeah.
to add. Okay, cool. I mean, yeah, In Limbo is a memoir, so it's about like my family and, diaspora, and I so it was just like writing like everything that I kind of already knew, but while being very, very careful about like, hey, my family is still alive, like, and my grandparents are still alive, like they can read this. And now we just got word that it's going to be translated and distributed in Korea, which is crazy, and that's where all my family is. Um, Yay! But yeah, I mean that. So I had to be really careful about, like my parents, like my mom especially, was like very like physically abusive, like, and now I have how do I like portray that in a way that makes her human? Like I don't want people to think that she's a monster. Like she's like a really nice person. Like a lot of the times, but I wanted to show her like, like my mom is a human and like my dad is a human, even though he was like pretty complicit in a lot of like these events. Um, and I just wanted to show I was really thinking about the people that I knew in real life. Like I don't want them to like look at my parents like in any like worse way. I mean, they at this point they probably do, but like the best thing that I could do was prepare them for that. Like along the way, I was sending them, PDFs of like, hey, this is exactly what is going to happen in the book. And, you got to make sure that you're prepared for this because this is going to be distributed around the world. And I just had to be really careful. I guess that's pretty much it. But yeah, it's a memoir. So I have to be as like, I want to be honest with not just myself, but I don't want this to be like a giant call out post for my family. Like I have to be very fair. Yeah. Thanks for the question. I thought that was a really good one.
Yeah, I actually, as you were talking, I have an unplanned follow-up question for In Limbo specifically. Since it is a memoir, which the other ones in this panel are not, um, when you were thinking about the storyline for In Limbo, did you have like a specific ending point in which you're like, this is where we're going towards?
What do you mean ending point? Like what? Like the ending of the
No,
book,
because
or?
yeah, sorry, that's what I meant. Like the ending of the book in terms of like, this is the scope, this is the time period that I want to show, and like it ends here. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it just felt perfectly natural to me. I think especially when I wrote this book, I was a few months out of college. So I didn't feel ready to talk about college right then yet, but maybe one day, I don't know. So I felt like high school was the only thing that I felt truly like I've like pretty much processed the most of it as possible. The ending did change like many times. I think the ending is always one of the most difficult parts in the book. But the way I got to the ending was, I mean, first it was like it felt very cheesy, like it didn't feel right to me. I mean, I think it's a more satisfying ending to a memoir, but to me it just didn't feel right. And then I was talking to my editor on the phone and I was telling her I was just like rambling a little bit as I do about, memories that I've had with my mom or like really soft, sweet memories. And I told her one of them, and she just starts crying. Like my editor starts crying, and I go, "Oh, that's the ending. Like that's the ending." And then that's the ending that it is right now. But yeah, that was really difficult to figure out. The ending is just a mess usually.
The next question that I have, or the next like book pairing that I want to talk about, are sort of Out of Character and Chloe and the Kaisha Boys, which I was thinking about that actually when we were, Deb, you were just saying about crying. I also cried at the end of Chloe and the Kaisha Boys. I know that like it is very, there's a lot of humor, there's a lot of light, and there's specifically a lot of love. But like I obviously won't talk about it now because it is super spoiler, but there's like a specific moment, basically the end, where just like tears were pouring down my face. But anyway, it's not what I'm gonna ask about. But um both of your books, Out of Character and Chloe and the Kaishao Boys, talk a lot about the struggle about being who you are, and sort of figuring out who you are, what you want to do, what you want to be, the big questions in life. So I'd love if you both could talk about what it was like to explore these themes in your books and your main character's relationship to how their future or what their expectations for their future changes over the course of the novel. And I guess my question when I was thinking about my tears was kind of if there was also a favorite scene you could talk about without spoilers.
I can go first.
Sorry, I was
Yeah,
gonna
I was
say
trying
like
to.
since I went first a while ago.
Yeah. I was like, I think that's what we're doing. Great. So yeah, with Out of Character, I think Cass has a good sense of where she's going in terms of like college and like what she wants to do in that regard, which is a little different from what it might normally be. I think there's a lot of great books about like what do I want to do with my life, and I think Cass kind of has that part figured out. But where the struggle comes in for her is she has this whole online world that she's very dedicated to, and since no one in her real life knows about it, she's trying to juggle the two. And I think she has to determine like, is this something I can bring into my real life, and like why have I kept it a secret for so long, which was kind of fun for me to explore because I was role playing back in the day, and we'll probably touch on this more, but I was role playing when I was in high school, and I was one of the few people who didn't keep it a secret, and that was kind of at a time when people were keeping it a secret because it was more of a newer thing. I'm aging myself. I'm not freshly out of college like Deb, but yeah, it's just a different world now, and I thought it was fun to kind of do the reverse where and because I check Goodreads, a lot of people are like, why is this such a secret? And I'm like, that is a very good question because I would never. But yeah, she just has to figure out how to make these two worlds kind of go together and not self-destruct along the way. And I think her biggest issue comes to be like, who am I in these two worlds, and like how can I make them one world? I'm trying not to spoil things and get too into it, and I'm trying to think of a scene that's relevant, um, but it's kind of spoilery, so I might forgo the scene. But yeah, it's you'll have to read it, I guess. I don't know. I'm just gonna call it and leave it there, and let me take over.
Yeah, I guess like the whole thing about Chloe also has like kind of she's based in Manila, but then her whole dream is basically to study animation in the US. So I guess it's the same thing that Jen was saying about like kind of how do you make these two worlds kind of like combine. But I don't know. It's what I love about Chloe is that she's so sure that she wants to be an animator. Like her dream is so clear. But for her, it's more like what's kind of like giving her like imposter syndrome is I think her family, she can sense that her family wants her to do something else. And I actually my first panel that I ever did with Crystal like months ago, someone asked me like, do you think it's selfish to want a different life? And then honestly I was like self-reflecting like, is it selfish to want a different life? But I think with what I loved when I was writing this, more than like kind of like that period of your life where you're trying to figure out your future, it was more, I think, trying to figure out like how what happens when you and your family kind of like have different expectations for what you want for your future. And then I feel like a lot of Asian stories, especially where it's always the disapproving parents that are seen as kind of like the bad guys in narratives. And I think that's so valid, like it happens a lot. But then I wanted this story to be more like they're different, but then the dad is not the bad guy in the story. It's more like they come from different perspectives, and the dad needs to understand where Chloe's coming from, but Chloe needs to understand where the dad is coming from as well. So I hope that's kind of like what happens through the book. Maybe you need to read it to like kind of see if that really happens. And I guess my favorite scenes, I guess this is what uh, maybe that's where Lily cried, because a lot of people who have relationships with their dad, or kind of like anything with dads, they like message me like, oh my god, I cried so much in that scene. So I guess anything with those are also my favorites. I think because it's a book about matchmaking three guys, but then I think the biggest love story here is like basically Chloe with her dad, and um just so many. This went through like so many rewrites. I think 80% of it changed from the first draft, but the things that stayed the same were those like big scenes with the dad, especially in the last part of the book. So yeah, I don't want to spoil too much, but definitely my favorite parts are with the dad.
Oh, okay. I'm unmuted. Okay. And then the final question I have, oh, not the final question, sorry. By the way, I forgot to mention as well, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I want to ask as well, because it's Bianca. Justine, you're talking about how Bianca Torre is afraid of everything is a comet. What did you say? Comedic? Did you say comedic thriller?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like comedic thriller, or I'll say like comedic mystery, either
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. Which is totally on point for the vibes for Bianca Torre. So I was wondering if you could talk about how you balance comedic thriller specifically, and the different sort of things that Bianca is learning about, like comedy aspects, murder aspects, thriller aspects.
Yeah, that was definitely like a big point of revisions, was to really like get all of the mystery thriller beats down and not like spend too much time just in the more like fun contemporary sort of like friendship story that the book is a lot, and also like Bianca's also like queer and gender journey that is like also going on throughout the story. But I think like I really had a fun time sort of figuring out that balance a little bit. And also, it felt in some ways like more relatable and honest to me, because I do think that, whenever characters and especially teenagers have things going on, hopefully not investigating a murder, but whether it's just like applying to colleges or like figuring out other things, like you always have a lot to balance, where there's going to be like personal stuff going on, whether it's like, for queer kids having like a discovery about your queer identity, or making new friends, being like nervous about like we hang out like outside of school, but are we actually like cool to be friends inside school, and like overthinking all of those things. So I think that it just kind of felt right for Bianca to kind of have to balance all of that while still investigating the murder mystery. But it was, in the earlier drafts, definitely a struggle to like keep tension up and like really figure out where to put those different like sort of creepy like thriller moments in between the more like heartwarming, like, going to like a non-binary support group, or like other things that also just happen during the story. So hopefully it worked out in the end, but it did definitely take, some revisions to get there.
Yeah, and I also wanted, because this was my question, I've done a few panels regarding Bianca Torre. And so the question I keep for wanting to ask and then forgetting to ask was about the list of fears. And I wanted to know if you knew all of the fears ahead of time, like, your master list. I think you put the master list at the end, right? But I wanted to know if it was like how that evolved, I guess.
Yeah, I will say, because I don't think this is exactly like spoilery, but throughout the story, Bianca mentions different like numbered fears that they have, and you see like the full list at the very end of the book, but it's never like the full list during the book, just random fears that pop up. So I didn't know all of them. When I was writing, I had like, I think some of them changed like throughout the process a little bit, but when it got to like a certain point, I was like, I think in copy edits, when my copy editor was like, some of these numbers are off and this is kind of a nightmare. And I was like, okay, let me actually like fix these like fear numbers. And I went through, and all of the fears that like directly appeared in the story, I like re-put in the list again. And then I did have some spaces where like there were numbers that didn't actually appear in like the text of the book, but like based on having a larger number, like there should be something there. So then I had a lot of fun at the end of just sort of like making up fears that I could include for those numbers that like didn't actually appear in the book, but like, some might be like a fun like video game or like anime reference that I was just able to include even though it didn't like actually appear in the story. So I'd say like there were certain fears that I definitely knew from the beginning, especially ones that are like more plot relevant. Like Bianca's biggest fear is like public speaking, kind of like doing things in front of people in that sense. So like that was always a big part of the story, especially because it comes back during the book. But there were other things that either like don't even appear in the book and they're just kind of a little like cute thing at the end that you can see in the full list, or there's stuff where like as I was writing I was like, oh, I need like a random fear, and I did kind of want to balance the list of fears because the book is so comedic in nature that like they aren't all like super serious, kind of like, not that other fears aren't understandable, but like basic, like more like that is actually a legitimately like scary thing to be afraid of, and then have other things that are like a little more like irrational in some senses, or things that like not necessarily everyone might be afraid of, and could feel a little funny in the moment even if there is some like actual emotion behind it.
Yeah. As you were talking, I was thinking, should I make Justine say like your favorite fear that does not appear in the text? But then I thought, would that be a little
I,
too spoilery?
I could say one, and it's not necessarily a spoiler because it doesn't appear in the book. So it's only like a fun thing at the end. But I included the video game Doki Doki Literature Club as one of Bianca's fears. And like, I'm just waiting for people to like tell me that that's funny and relatable, but like not many people have. So that was
It's relatable. It's relatable.
right. Like, so that was my favorite, like little just like reference to add in.
Perfect. We're like exposing some Easter eggs here in live chat. Um, I have also some. I mean, I had so many questions. Also, that like I included a lot of questions to everyone, but like there were quite a lot more that I kind of drafted and then was like, this is truly unhinged. Like you need to tone it down. So some other questions that I had, or when I was thinking about other sort of things that I wanted to talk specifically about that really resonated with me in your books. So I want to start off with Chloe and the Kajau Boys has a lot of side characters and setups. That's like one of the core kind of principles and premises of the book. So I wanted to know who was the hardest and easiest of these like side character date kind of situations to write.
Ooh, great question. So she goes on basically 3 arranged dates in the book. But fun fact, like when I went on sub at first with this book, there were actually like 5 dates. But they weren't like big parts of the story. Like they would just go on the date and buy, except for the eventual love interest. And then every editor was like, "Oh, we love the premise, but we want the boys to be more tied to the story." So that's when like I was like, I can't make 5 boys relevant. 3 is my max, so that it became 3 then. But yeah, I think my favorite to write is I don't know if it's spoiling. I actually like love all of them. Might be like my soft spot. Basically, he's the best friend's brother. Very like I love like love interests in books who are you think they're just really quiet and grumpy, but the grumpy sunshine trope basically. And but yeah, that's basically him. He loves gaming, but he has a heart of gold that only like Chloe knows. But yeah, the toughest one for me to write would be Raph. More because basically his um I'm not sure. I don't think it's a spoiler because it happens like pretty early when you see Raph in the book. But basically, his family doesn't approve. They're Chinese Filipino, but they don't approve of their children dating anyone who's not Chinese Filipino. So even Filipinos without Chinese heritage, they're not that okay with. So um, it was basically hard for me to. I was really scared about writing that sensitive topic actually because like it's still very real. It happens to the community and the Chinese Filipino community, and I'm not sure if I'm the best. I don't want to be a spokesperson for this. I'm not sure if I can preach to people like, oh, don't be racist. I mean, you shouldn't, but like I don't think I should be the person like telling everyone to do that. And since he was also basically he was dating Chloe's best friend who was Filipino and then was hiding her from the family. So I think he's a really good guy, but then I also wanted to make sure like I wanted to call out like these things are not okay. But also like he's a teenage boy who's doing a lot and trying his best, but also seeing like from the perspective of like the best friend, like it's not okay to be hidden from people like that and to make you feel things kind of like discriminated against. So yeah, that was a very long answer, but basically those he was I love all of them, but then that was the situation that I was like, I really need to be careful when I wrote those scenes.
Yeah, because I think each of those side characters as well, and that's why I asked as well, they have such a depth to their characters. Like it's not just kind of they appear and then they like disappear. You know, they have a lot of story behind them, and like you can tell. I love when you see a side character and you like can see the history behind them, like all of these facets of a character behind them, and you almost feel like, you know, everyone feels like they're the main character, or they don't. How can I say this? We're all kind of living in our self-absorbed lives, and I think it's fun to see like a side character who you're like, I want to see like their perspective, right? Like there's so much behind who they are as a person and like their traits in their life, basically. um Danny, you talked a little bit about it, and that is one thing I want to talk about for Out of Character is the kind of role playing, the fan fiction, the kind of online aspect to Out of Character. So I wanted to ask how you created that world, you know, inspirations and the interaction between the sort of role playing online world and the like this non-online world.
Yeah. So like I mentioned before, I was role playing back when I was in high school and into college, and much later than college as well. And I knew first I didn't want to have anything that was too similar to what I'd been doing back then, because I didn't want to accidentally pull from scenes I'd maybe done with other people. So I wanted something that could stick, but that wasn't too similar to anything else. So I actually brought a show and tell. It's very, very loosely based. It's not fan fiction in any way, but Seafire by Natalie Parker. I was reading that, I think a year or two probably before I started writing Out of Character, and I was like, what do I want to work with? What do I want to do? And it kind of hit me like, I want to do something kind of piratey, but not like full on pirates, but then also Anastasia for some reason popped into my head. So it's kind of this weird blend. If I picture like the Tide Wars books that she's role playing, if I picture the opening of that, it's like a mix of Seafire and like the opening scenes of Anastasia where they're like fleeing the palace and all that stuff. So it's this weird blend of the two, but also not like them at all. And again, that was just to kind of separate from what I'd ever written and, something that could stand on its own still. And yeah, it was a lot of fun to work with. And I will say too, if you've read the book, there's little snippets between the chapters with role-playing scenes and like out of character conversations. And originally there was something between every chapter, but when we got to editing, my editor was like, okay, some of these, like, they're all great, but some of these are taking away from, what's going on in the actual scenes in the chapters. So we cut quite a few of them, and, now they live in my head and only in my head. So it was sad to let them go, but it was very logical. Like I completely agreed. But I think it was just fun to play with like the world of Cass and then the world of Tide Wars and just try to find a nice balance between the two.
Yeah, I think that's so fascinating as well, because I think that I'm glad that you mentioned it, because I was like not sure if I should, bring up the role playing snippets,
Mm-hmm.
between the
Mm-hmm.
chapters. But I love how they felt like a little bit like interwoven Easter eggs, like conversations that are happening in these role playing chapters are mirroring, are interacting, with the feelings in our, IRL, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's fascinating that, you had to take some out, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a lot of weaving and readjusting. And what was funny too is when I wrote the initial draft of the book, like long before my agent and everything, there were no role play scenes, but I knew they needed to exist. And then when I went through a mentorship program, my mentor was like, hey, what if we added role play scenes? And I was like, I am getting to that, but thank you. That makes it valid that I need to do it. So yeah, they were a lot of fun to write, but sadly some are no longer with us. But yeah, it was a great balance to add some of that in so people could get a look at, you know, what role playing is like, at least from the perspective I was doing it. There's so many ways to role play and write fan fiction, but that was just my experience with it. So it was kind of fun to dive back into that world, but also not as fun because I wasn't actually role playing with anyone. I was just writing them myself. So it's a little different.
I want to talk about the historical fiction setting of the Davenports. I love the author. I don't know what is actually called in the book, but I love like that author note portion, or like the note about the historical setting and like the research that you did for the Davenports. So I was wondering if you could talk about the challenges and the joys to this setting and specifically the time period. And I think that one of my favorite things, because when I first heard of the premise of the Davenports, I thought it was just going to be like the family as characters, but actually you have Ruby and Amy Rose. And so I wondered if you could talk about how it was to develop like characters that were not part of kind of the central character, not central characters, the central family, you know, the core family.
Yeah, for me, the history part of the Davenports was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed diving into that. It had all started when I saw an article about Frederick Patterson, who is the son of C.R. Patterson, and he was standing in front of an automobile. He was very dapper in like a three-piece suit and a bowler hat, and I was like really excited. And it had the tagline, "First and only Black-owned automobile company." And I was blown away that I had never known about this part of history. So that kind of got my wheels going and prompted me to research more about this family and this time period. And when I learned that Mr. Patterson had 3 daughters, I was like, "Oh, someone needs to, like, write a story about this girl and how their lives were like," and I couldn't find any, and it was part of this reading slump that I was in and joining NaNoWriMo with my brother that I started the first draft of the Davenports. And a lot of Mr. Patterson's story was based off in Ohio, but I found in my research so much about Chicago and that flourishing economy and different opportunities there. Um, I kind of switched the story to Chicago, and I also didn't want to take away from the Patterson family and their history and their story. And so for me, shining a light on things that really happened and this lifestyle that really existed and all these opportunities that Black Americans were able to capitalize on was a lot of fun. And I think that was a lot of the joy that went into this novel was the going to the shops and the tea rooms and having this like alternate, it's not an alternate history, but like this alternate point of view of history that actually happened that I was able to really share, and that was a lot of fun. And for the side characters, Ruby and Amy Rose, I wanted to add to this family of wealth. Amy Rose is a maid in the household, so she grows up seeing what can be achieved, and that kind of inspires her to follow her dreams of opening her own business. And because she is more of the working class, she can go in and out of like high society and, you know, people who are part of that working class and connect with them and bring that other perspective. And for Ruby, her family is also wealthy, but because of her father's campaign to become mayor, they're seeing a kind of a loss of their wealth. So we also got to follow her story and I got to explore what that was like. So having those two really strong women be part of the story and be part of the Davenport's like sphere of influence really allowed me to see Chicago in that time period from a lot of different angles. And I was really happy that I was able to explore that. And it was a lot of fun because they're all very different personalities and they're all very strong. And I think I really liked that I got to be different people throughout the story.
Okay, can I ask you like a sneaky side question?
Yeah.
Your book is a part of a series, so it's the
Mhm.
first one of the series. Can you tell us a little anything about the next one?
Yeah, so the book 2 is, it starts off a couple weeks after the end of book 1. So if anyone's had read book 1 already, they know that some girls made some very big decisions that kinda threw their lives off balance and really, push that envelope with their parents on how they want to continue and live their lives. And I would say there's like a big event that happens for the Davenport family that kind of allows the girls and John to kind of explore their dreams. So I'm really excited for people to see how they take advantage of that event.
That was my like biggest burning question after finishing the Davenports. It was like
Yeah.
need to know what is the projected like, questions for the next one. Um, I want to talk about In Limbo, and you had mentioned as well about the black and white. So I would love if you could talk a little bit about that as well, because that's something I didn't include in the original question, but it is something that I was thinking about as well. So I would love to know if you could talk about the drawing process and how your artistic process works with the story and the art, right? Because you have these two like mediums of story and the art illustrations as well.
Mhm. I mean, yeah, I mean, first of all, it took a really long time to draw. I would say, like, this is why I'm always fighting for artists to get paid more. But like, this book is 350 pages, and each page took me like 8 to 12 hours to draw. And I would only draw like 4 pages a week. So you would like calculate that and think about adding on top of like all the thumbnailing and all the edits. And the edits themselves took like 2 years. Like we were just editing that bad boy for 2 years, basically. But yeah, I mean, it took a lot out of me just drawing. I was getting really burnt out. I was working primarily on my iPad, so I drew everything on there instead of like using Photoshop or anything. Um, but yeah, I it's interesting because I did what most people should not do, and I drew everything before I actually figured out the dialogue. Um, so I didn't have a script. Like I was just writing. I was thumbnailing, like visually thumbnailing based off of the synopsis that I had submitted to my editor. And from then I was like, okay, like I'm gonna draw these bubbles and like let's think about what kinds of words can fit in here. And that's like such a bad way to work. So I'm not doing that again. But I was really treating the book like the art of the book like an animated film. So like a 2D animated film where all the backgrounds are very painterly and static and have like a different style from like the characters. So the characters are like line drawn. They're the ones that's going to be animated and they're like a little bit like simpler drawn. But yeah, I really put everything I've got into drawing this book. And I don't think I'll be working in this style ever again, actually. Like, I'm going to be doing a different kind of drawing for my future books. And those will be in color for people, for those reviewers wondering why this wasn't in color. But yeah, the next edition of In Limbo will come with a pack of Crayola crayons so the readers can color it themselves. Yeah.
For the artistic process, you're mentioning that it was all on your iPad, right? When you're talking about like changing your process for the next one, are you talking about more just like sort of bare bone sort of dialogue slash, sort of a script ish and then art? Or are you talking also about like the actual artistic process?
Oh, I was talking about the actual artistic process, but definitely like from now on, I will have a script first. So like that, not having a script at the beginning was like a very big mistake on my part. And it it was like a bit of like a gamble of, well, would this book actually be good? Because like the book was constantly evolving as I was processing my trauma. So the book, the like not only were like the dialogue change was a dialogue changing, but I was like changing like what was being like the subtext of all the dialogue at the same time. But yeah, I mean, I drew everything. I'm still drawing everything like pretty much on my iPad for like future books and stuff. but I'm gonna be drawing like I'm like putting everything I've got into each page still. But I found that like my my track record is usually that each book I make takes 5 years to draw. So I I could be doing less time on each book. I just like don't want to, and I would rather die with like books that I know I put everything I've got into rather than like half-assing each book, if that makes any sense. But yeah, they're just going to be drawn in different. I think they're going to be drawn in a similar style to the kind of illustration work I do for like commercial illustrations instead of publishing. Yeah.
Okay, I have a few. Oh wait, my phone just turned off. I have a few few like questions, or I don't know how people like to call them. I've seen people say like lightning round questions, I suppose. So questions that are similar to that. My first one is that I would love to know what books or authors, or even just like pieces of media, right, that you like keep coming back to. I find that I'm the worst at like revisiting things and like rereading, stuff like that. So I'm always intrigued to know like what's a piece of media or piece of book, or author that like you keep coming back to. Justine, do you want to start?
Yeah, I can say I don't reread a lot. I think because I always am so excited about what else I can read that it's hard to go back to the same. But in far of in terms of inspiration, as I feel like I mentioned everywhere, I'm a really huge fan of webcomics, and like I read a ton of those. I also love animated movies, so those like inspire me a lot to help with description is not always my strongest suit because I'm the type of person that like if I close my eyes I probably wouldn't remember what like anyone else was wearing. So kind of like having those visual inspirations I think helps me a lot and pull that a little bit more out of my writing. And like there are certain movies that are just like my comfort movies that I go back to a lot. Like I've probably watched Spirited Away like at least twice every year or something, like definitely at least once every year. And I think like movies are a little easier for me to just like go back to and rewatch, where there will be books where like I know I love it and I know it's one of my favorites, but I still might not remember every detail of it. I just remember that I love it and like it's something that really meant a lot to me, at the time that I read it. But it is hard for me to like go back and reread books when there's other books on my like TBR that I'm also so excited about.
I think like Justine, I have a hard time rereading books I've already read because I'm so excited for other books. Like I'm so excited for all your books, and it's very hard to prioritize, do I want to go back to this thing that brought me joy, or do I want to find the next thing that will bring me joy? But for me, my comfort movies are The Mummy, like the first one, and um, I really like Jurassic Park and um, Pride and Prejudice. Like those are my comfort movies that I go back to when I want something to watch. Sometimes I'll have them in the background while I'm writing because I don't need to look at the screen. I already know what's happening. It makes it very easy.
Yeah, I have to jump in and say Pride and Prejudice as well. Is it the 2005 or the other one, Crystal? With Keira Knightley.
I will watch the miniseries or the one in
Okay.
2005. Like it doesn't matter which one. I'll watch both.
I'll say I watched the miniseries for the first time, like, I don't know, sometime in the last year. And I kind of regret not watching it earlier because I somehow didn't love it, but I get why people do. But yeah, in the same line, like the newer Emma movie, I've been watching a lot. There's a couple or a few scenes where I just like lose it every time because it's like the dad is me in so many ways, which I hate to admit, but he'll do something and I'm like, oh, there I am. And then also for some reason, Knives Out also does it for me. So we have like Jane Austen and then we have Knives Out. Whenever I fly, I usually either watch Knives Out or an Austen something or You've Got Mail because I just go back to those all the time. But yeah, like Justine and Crystal said, I don't reread a lot just because, the time constraint and just wanting to read everything all the time. So not a lot of rereads, but I think the author I always go back to is Julie Murphy, just because she was kind of the first YA author who showed me like you can write fat characters without, making it a thing. Like it's just part of who they are, and it's just, it's kind of like the least interesting thing about them, right? Like it's just a part of their life, and I really enjoy that. So whenever she has something new out, whatever it is, I'm on it pretty much right away.
I can go. I also don't. I embarrassingly don't read as much as I should. I also don't read as many comics as I should. But I feel like one artist I do go back to. I don't really think about books. I think about like drawing. And his name is, I have to like Google it, but his name is Daisuke Igarashi, but he wrote Children of the Sea, which is like, it's not just his drawings, but it's like the way his theme, the overarching theme of all of his work is about like, we are in the universe and the universe is also inside us too. And he writes in like so many different ways, and it's so gorgeous, and his drawings are so like, I mean, they're really good drawings, and they're like kind of scratchy, and it kind of tells me like, yeah, like your drawings can be like refined, but they don't have to be like too refined. Like they're still really high quality drawings. I'm actually gonna put a link to his work in the private chat like really quick, but yeah, that's the Google images. But just the way he draws is just kind of nuts. But that's the artist that I think about a lot. But I really want to read, there's like two, his series Children of the Sea. The last two books in the series, there's 5 of them, but the last 2 books haven't been in stock in bookstores since like 2011. So I'm like really having a hard time trying to find them. But the movie is still on Netflix, but I still want to read the books still. Yeah.
That line about the universe thing was so beautiful. I was like, oh my God. But I guess I'm the same with Jenna, that like because I'm a really slow reader, and I'm just so like, there's so many good books out there. Like all your books sound amazing, and I wish I was fast. I could just like read one like a day. But I guess that's why I don't reread a lot, but I revisit, like if there's there are a lot of authors that like if they release new books, I'm like, I'm gonna get this, I'm gonna buy these, because like these authors have given me so much joy in the past. I think like Nicola Yoon comes to mind. Like Sun is Also a Star is one of my favorite YA books ever. Becky Albertalli is one of my favorites as well. For movies, I watch like so many rom-coms. I guess that's why I like writing fluffy rom-coms. I don't know, the one that there's this filmmaker, Alice Wu. She's only made like 2 movies, and they're like 2 of my favorite movies ever. It's like The Half of It and Saving Face. The Half of It is like, it's on Netflix. Like I hope it's still on Netflix. I should rewatch it again. But then I think it's just like such good writing, and then like it's plotted so well, and the acting is so good. It's one of my favorite like coming of age high school movies. And yeah, it's one of the movies that I'm like, if I want to get inspired and like remember what good storytelling is, I go to that. Or it's All the Boys Love Before, just because like I just really love feeling like swooning over that. And yeah.
Yeah, I like asked this question fully knowing that I really rarely ever reread things, even just like books in a series, right? When you know the next sequel comes out and you're like, wow, I really should reread that first one. And I'm just like, no, no way am I going back. I want to ask one final question because I want to end, talking about debuts, and I want to ask everyone what other 2023 debuts are you excited for or have loved? So I don't know. Crystal, do you want to start?
Yeah, for me, I am really excited to read There Goes the Neighborhood by Jade Adia. I have had it on my shelf for a while now, and so I'm really excited once I turn in the rest of my pages that I can dive into that one.
I can go. I have to like look at my bookshelf like right there. a friend of mine released her middle grade graphic novel Mish the Bad Demon and by Michelle Lamb. And Michelle is a storyboard artist and like sometimes a director in Los Angeles. So when you read her book, it's like it's really cute, but you can also like see like, oh, I can see like that you are definitely a storyboard artist because this reads like an animated TV show. And her drawings are really good, and it's very like the subtext is very much all about like anti-imperialism and colonialism, but it's like in this wrapped up in this really cute like, oh, in this world of fairies and demons, and it's really sweet, but I highly recommend.
I can go next. I actually just did a post on this for a bookstore, so I'm like trying to remember what I said because it was hard to put together because there's so many good debuts coming out and that have come out. I've read Deb's just the other day actually, and then Justine's a while ago. And yeah, I'm trying to make it through all of yours because I read the descriptions of all of them and I was like, yes, all of these. But a couple others that I've read that I really enjoyed. If Tomorrow Doesn't Come by Jen St. Jude. It's kind of like a end of the world. I don't want to give too much away, but it's very much like the world is going to end in 9 days. Like, what are you going to do in those last days? And then Fake Dates and Mooncakes by Cher Lee. It's just so delightful. I don't even know what to say about it because it blows my mind every time I think about it, but please read it. It is so good. It's so cute. And it makes you want to eat all the mooncakes in the world. So it's very good though.
I have one that sort of answers both questions because I read an earlier draft, but I'm really excited to read like the final version, and that's Caught in a Bad Fomance by Al Gonzalez Rose, which is a very cute rom-com that'll come out later in the year, and the cover's beautiful. So if you haven't seen it yet, take a look, but I'm super excited to like read the final and get to like hold the book.
I read this book earlier this year. I think it came out in January. I'm not sure if January or February. Play the Game by Charlene Allen. It's kind of like how Justine was describing her book. It's like a mystery and also just like really good voice. I just don't know how she managed to like combine all these elements and make like such a good story. And it taught me so much about restorative justice as well, which I wasn't familiar with before the book. But it doesn't feel heavy. I'm not sure if I'm pitching it well, but like I really enjoyed it. I think it's like a really well written book.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to rewatch the end of this panel specifically and like immediately then just make my list afterwards because these all sound so great. Speaking of books, obviously, everyone, also all of our panelists' books, all the links are in the description box below. So you definitely should go and check them out because they're all out. So you could pick them up today if you wanted to. But thank you all so much for chatting about your books. Thank you also to everyone who was watching. And I hope you all have a really great rest of your day and rest of your reading year, basically. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.